Good morning and welcome to Resurrection Sunday. I don't know about you, but I sure could use some resurrection in my life right now. Things have gone, if you watched last week's Palm Sunday, was that last week? So much has happened in a week. If you watched last week's Palm Sunday sermon, you heard me talk about all the different things that we were discovering under my house, in the attic of the house. Well, this week has been more discoveries, and these are not fun discoveries. We're talking asbestos discoveries, a little bit more mold. Yeah, so it has been a week. I feel like I've lived a lifetime in the past 7 days. I feel like every single time I go home in order to check on the work and how things are moving along, the contractor calls me over and is like, hey, we found something else. Let me show you a couple of pictures. And normally, it's not good news. So it's been a week where it just has felt like the weight just keeps getting placed on our shoulders, and we're sinking a little further into the ground. So when you have a week like that, it's hard to talk about resurrection because you feel like, for me right now, I feel like I'm stuck in this perpetual Saturday. Like I'm stuck in the grave, and I can't even see the cracks of light at this moment. Because that's what it would have felt like for the first disciples. Friday, Jesus dies, he's crucified, he gets put in a cave, and Friday is just pitch black. There's no light, there's no hope. For us, on Friday, we still leave with a little bit of hope because we know how the story ends. With the first disciples, they had no idea how the story was going to end. For them, it was game over. There were no more bonus lives. Everything was being put back in the box. They were going to go home. Here's one of my favorite resurrection stories in the book of Luke, verse 13. Now that same day, speaking about Easter morning, the women had already gone to the tomb. They found it empty, but these two disciples were going to meet. They have no idea about any of this. So the same day, on Easter morning, Sunday morning, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. What I find really interesting about this verse is Easter morning starts in the dark. It begins with defeat for these disciples here, and even for the women going to the tomb. When they went to the tomb, they were not expecting to find that it was going to be empty. They were expecting to find Jesus' body still there. No matter how many times Jesus might have told his disciples, his followers, what was going to happen, who's really going to believe about resurrection? It doesn't happen normally. So when Jesus is like, hey, I'm going to die, then I'm going to be resurrected, everyone's like, okay. Then it actually happens, he dies, and everyone kind of forgets what he says, or they just discredit it, because they had placed all their hope in him. They were trusting him. He was going to be the Savior. He was the Messiah. And he goes and gets himself killed. And now these two disciples are walking to a village called Emmaus. And Luke tells us it is 7 miles from Jerusalem. This is important because what is being communicated here is that these disciples are going home. Emmaus, it's where they live. Jerusalem is where it had all ended. And so they're going home with their tails between their legs, defeated, filled with a spirit of despair, defeat. There's a spirit of fear, like what's going to happen? We got to get out of here. We got to go home because they might round up his followers as well and crucify us. They have no idea. Hopelessness. They have no clue what's going to happen. Where is life going to take them? So they're heading home, and those 7 miles would have felt like 50 miles. There's this dark storm cloud that is hovering over them this entire time. There's no sunlight. They're stuck in the pitch black. You ever have a moment like that? You ever have a season in life like that? Where it feels like the walls are just crashing in around you and there is nothing. You're looking for some sort of hope that you can grab hold of, but there's nothing there. It's like you have butter on your hands and you're trying to climb up a ladder, but your hands are so slippery, the butter, you just keep slipping off the rungs and there's nothing that you can grab hold of. That's how it would have felt for these disciples on Easter morning. I know for many of us, Easter morning, we think it's a glorious morning. We wake up and everything is back to normal, but that's not how the story went for the first disciples. It began in darkness, hopelessness, being filled with dread and overwhelmed with grief as to what had just happened. It's like they put all their money on black, it came up red, and they had nothing left. And it continues here. They were talking with each other, these two disciples, about everything that had happened. I can't believe this happened. Do you remember this? Remember that? They were talking about all of it, and as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. They're walking, probably staring at the ground. Jesus comes right up, walks alongside them. But they were kept from recognizing him. So here's Jesus walking right next to them, and they have no idea who they're walking with. They have no clue who is walking these 7 miles with them. And so Jesus asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still. They're walking. Jesus asked this question. They stopped. Their faces downcast. And one of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem and you do not know the things that have happened there in these days?" Like, how can you be so dull, man? You have no idea what just happened? You have no idea what just went down? Like, really? Really? Like, where are you from? How do you not know what has just happened in Jerusalem? And so Jesus asked, "Tell me, what things?" So they go on and they tell all about Jesus. Jesus hears this story about himself. We thought he was going to be the Messiah. We thought he was going to save us. We placed all of our hope. We left our lives. We left everything for him. And he goes and he gets himself killed. And then Jesus responds, he answers, he's like, "How foolish, how slow of heart. Didn't you not know that Christ had to suffer and go through these things in order to enter into his glory?" But still, these two disciples have no idea who they're walking with, and they don't trust the story that Jesus had been telling them before he was crucified. As they approached the village, this is verse 28, to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, stranger, for it's nearly evening. The day is almost over. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to get dark. There could be some robbers. Why don't you stay with us for the night, and then tomorrow you can go on your way. You can return to whatever far-off village you happen to be from." So Jesus went in to stay with them. Now when he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them, reminiscent of the Last Supper, this last meal that Jesus had shared with his disciples right before he was crucified. When this happened, we're told, verse 31, then their eyes were opened and they recognized him. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. How's that? All of a sudden, oh my goodness, it's Jesus. Poof, he's gone, like he's punking them or something. And they asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" I love this verse. Love, love, love it. Were not our hearts burning within us? In the beginning of this resurrection story with these two disciples, they're looking at the externals. They're looking at things that are beyond themselves. And when you look at the things beyond yourself, the things that you can't control, the externals, the things that are happening around you, the things that are happening to you, it can become very easy to be overwhelmed with despair. I know. This week, every single time I was shown another picture, this is what we found, this is what's going on, this is what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to remove everything out of your bedroom in order to turn this into a decontamination chamber to get these asbestos tiles out of your house. Yeah, every single time something like that happens, it's just it just feels like there's one hit after the next. The despair begins to creep up. The fear as to what's there in the house, it begins to creep in a little bit more. So when we focus on our externals, it's easy to live with a spirit of defeat. And then here's this verse: were our hearts not burning within us? There was something else, a different spirit at work within the hearts of these disciples. But in the moment, they didn't allow themselves to be led by that spirit. They allowed the spirit of the externals, the spirit of anxiety, fear, their circumstances, to be greater than that spirit that was within their hearts. Oftentimes in life, there are different spirits at work. And sometimes we are led by that spirit that's outside of ourselves, that weighs us down, that burdens us. And it happens when we look at everything that's happening around us. It can happen when you turn the news on, when your health is threatened, when there's things that are just going in a direction completely opposite how you want things to go. We focus on that and it becomes overwhelming. That's why it's totally normal in those moments to feel defeated, to feel hopeless. And then after the fact, the disciples come out with, yeah, wasn't there something else happening within us that we sort of suppressed, that we pressed down? We weren't allowing that spirit to rise up and to fill us. Question for all of us in every moment of life is, what spirit are we allowing to lead us? What spirit are we allowing to speak into our hearts? What spirit are we entrusting ourselves to? I love this verse in Romans chapter 8, Paul speaking about the resurrection. He says this, Romans 8 verse 11. If the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his spirit who lives in you. Do you see the power of what Paul's saying here? You see the significance of this? Paul's saying the same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead, the same spirit that brought resurrection to the body of Jesus, that spirit can also reside within you. That same spirit is right there within your hearts. Yeah, how often do we allow ourselves to believe that truth, to trust that truth? You know, we often think, when we talk about the Easter story, the resurrection story, it's about Jesus being resurrected from the dead. And it is. Yes, that's a central part of the story. But the same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead is at work within you. It's at work within your hearts. That same spirit can bring resurrection to your life, right where you find yourself. When I was in high school, I broke my leg twice playing soccer. And after I broke my leg the first time, about a year or so later, I went back to playing soccer. When I started playing, though, I was playing scared. I was hesitant because I didn't want to break another leg. Being in a full leg cast for 8 to 12 weeks was not a fun experience. Having your bones shattered on the soccer field, not a lot of fun, not something that I wanted to replicate, which unfortunately I did a couple of years later. But at the time when I started playing soccer again, I wasn't very aggressive. I was worried. I was scared that I was going to hurt myself again. So I remember there was one game. We were in the town league. I was playing goalie, and the other team was coming down the field, and one of their forwards crossed the ball into the air, right into the goalie box. So I ran to the top of the box, and I didn't want one of the other team members, one of the other forwards, to get to the ball, because he was going to go for the ball, and I was about to go for the ball. So I jump up, but I sort of half-heartedly jump up into the air. And so this other guy comes in, and he knocks me on the ground. And I remember sitting there on the ground. I think I had the ball in my possession. I remember sitting there on the ground thinking, I'm okay. I got knocked on the ground. The worst thing happened to me, and I'm here. Maybe I felt my legs, realized, okay, nothing's broken, everything is intact. But then I got really annoyed. Who is this guy to knock me on my butt? I'm gonna allow this guy to knock me on the ground? Like, no way, this isn't going to happen again. So from that moment, it lit a fire in my belly. I became more aggressive. If a ball was kicked into the air in the goalie box, instead of having someone come and lean into me and knock me over, I was going to grab the ball and put all my weight into knocking the other team over. So I started playing more aggressive. I started living with a different spirit. Instead of a spirit of retreat, of despair and defeat, I started living with a spirit of power, of aggression, a spirit of, this is my goal and I am going to defend it, and no one else is going to come in here and put a ball in the back of the net. Yeah, there's different spirits that we can live by in life. We can live with a spirit of fear. We can live with a spirit of defeat, failure. And it's very enticing to do so when everything is crashing down in front of you. So what do you do in those moments when you're feeling the spirit of despair and defeat welling up inside you? You stop for a minute and you remind yourself about a different spirit that lives within your heart. You pause and you remind yourself that living within you is the same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. You remind yourself that within you is a spirit that brings resurrection and salvation and new life. You remind yourself that something that was meant for evil, for harm, like the death of Jesus, actually produced new life and hope and salvation and healing to the world. So in those moments when you're threatened to trust a spirit of defeat, or hopelessness, helplessness, it's when you smile. You dig your heels into the ground and you remind yourself, within me is a spirit of power and hope. A spirit that can bring resurrection to even some of the worst moments that we experience in life. So this Easter morning, this Resurrection Sunday, may you entrust yourself to the same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. May you entrust yourself to the spirit within you that breathes new life and hope, a spirit that brings light to the darkness, a spirit that has the ability to conquer all the external circumstances that we face throughout our lives. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot that threaten to bring us down. And in those moments, may you stop, may you smile, and may you remind yourself, within me is a spirit that brings hope and resurrection. So may you trust that spirit this morning. And may the grace, the peace, and the resurrected Christ be with you this morning, my friends.